Hey guys.
Hi.
Welcome back. Today is Good Friday. We have a lot to cover today, a lot of stories in the Bible we're going to read, and then we're going to do our project. Yesterday we talked about Jesus cleaning the disciples' feet and then the Last Supper. Again, the craft we did yesterday was with things that you should have at home. And today is the same thing. If you don't have the things, it's really easy adjustments to make it work anyway. I'm really excited. I think that these are going to be really unique and really, really interesting to see how they're all so different. So after the Last Supper, Jesus decides to go pray. He goes into the garden. And again, this story reminds me of Jesus cleansing the temple, not because it's a similar story, but because it shows that Jesus is very human, that he's having these emotions. You know, he's asking God to please think of a different way or save him from this if it's possible, which, you know, I think that would be how most of us would be feeling. And I think it's really important to remember that, yes, he sacrificed himself, and yes, he is the Son of God, and he did all these things, but he was still human, and he still felt a certain way about it. So, Thomas, I'm going to have you start off. We're going to get through the reading, and then we will do our craft. Please focus.
Jesus prepares to die. Then Jesus went out with the disciples to the Mount of Olives. In a place called Gethsemane, there is a peaceful garden where he often liked to pray. Judas knew that after supper, Jesus would go there with his disciples. Judas had decided that the Garden of Gethsemane would be the ideal place to have Jesus arrested. There would be no crowds of supporters and no danger of a riot.
When Jesus arrived at Gethsemane, he was feeling very troubled. "Sit here while I go over there to pray," he told the disciples. Then, taking Peter, James, and John with him, he went to a secluded part of the garden. "Please stay with me and keep watch," he said to the 3 apostles. "My heart is heavy and I feel I could die of sorrow." Then, just a short distance away from them, Jesus fell on the ground and prayed to God. "My Father," he said, "if possible, don't let me go through the terrible suffering that lies ahead. You can do anything. You are able to save me from this. But if you want it to happen, let me do what pleases you, not what is easier for me." Jesus was so anxious that as he prayed, the sweat poured from him like great drops of blood.
When he turned to his 3 friends, Jesus found that they had fallen asleep. "Could you not just stay awake with me for 1 hour?" he asked Peter sadly. "Get up and pray, so that you are not tempted to rest. You mean well, but your bodies are weak." Then, twice more, Jesus went away to pray. Again, he asked his heavenly Father to spare him the painful death that he would have to endure. God heard the prayers of his Son, and he sent an angel to strengthen him for what he had to face.
When Jesus returned to his followers the 3rd time, he said, "Are you still sleeping? You must wake up now. The time has come for the Son of God to be handed over to his enemies. Look, here comes the one who has betrayed me." If you look, you can see Jesus praying and the apostles sleeping behind him. Jesus is arrested. The next story. The disciples peered out into the night. They could see many shadows in the dark and hear the sound of feet marching into the garden. Then they saw the glint of steel in the moonlight and knew that there were people carrying swords. The apostles leapt to their feet. Then the disciples caught sight of Judas. He was leading a crowd of soldiers and officials toward them. Judas was muttering to the guards, "The one I kiss is the man to arrest."
As he approached Jesus, Judas leaned forward to kiss him. "Good evening, Master," he said. Jesus replied, "Judas, are you going to betray the Son of God with a kiss?" After that, the soldiers seized Jesus. Peter drew his own sword and struck the servant of the high priest, cutting off his right ear.
"Put your sword away, Peter," said Jesus. "Those that live by fighting will die that way. If I call out to my Father, he would send 12 legions of angels to protect me. But I must do what God has planned."
Then Jesus touched the ear of the wounded man, and immediately it was healed. Jesus turned to the chief priests and officers of the temple guard who had come for him. "Am I supposed to be leading a rebellion? Why have you come with weapons against me?" he asked. "Every day I was with you in the temple court, and you didn't lay a hand on me, but you choose to do your evil business in the dark." Jesus continued, "Carry on, this must all take place, so that what was foretold by the prophets should happen." When the disciples saw that Jesus had been arrested, they deserted him and fled.
Okay, so if you look here, you can see all those people coming to get Jesus. Judas is betraying him with a kiss. Peter disowns Jesus. Peter watched to see where the crowd took his master and followed at a safe distance. They marched Jesus to the house of the high priest. There he was put on trial before the chief priests and the Pharisees. Peter went as far as the courtyard of the house and waited around nervously, mingling with the guards that were gathered there. As he sat with the soldiers warming himself by the fire, a servant girl came up to him. "Weren't you a friend of that Jesus of Nazareth?" she asked, peering at him closely in the firelight.
Peter panicked. "No," he answered. "I don't know the man." He moved away from the fire and wandered over to a gateway nearby. Another servant noticed him and called out, "This fellow over here is one of that lot from Galilee." Again, Peter denied that he knew Jesus. "I've nothing to do with him," he said. Some time later, Peter was talking with one of the crowd. A man came up to him and said, "Here, you're one of that man's followers, aren't you? You've got an accent like his, and I saw you in that olive grove near Gethsemane." "I don't know what you're talking about," Peter answered. As soon as he had spoken, Peter heard a cock crowing, and the cold light of dawn lit up the sky. Then Peter remembered what Jesus had said. "Before the cock crows to announce the dawn, you will disown me 3 times. Three.
Peter looked up. In the distance, he could see the face of Jesus, his Lord and Master, staring out from the trial he endured. Their eyes met, and Peter felt desperately ashamed. He loved Jesus so much, yet he had just been cowardly, weak, and disloyal. Peter left the courtyard and wept bitterly. So here you can see a picture of Peter denying Jesus, and that's the rooster crowing. Jesus on trial, our next story. Inside the house, the high priest questioned Jesus about his disciples and his teaching. The Jewish leaders had tried to find false evidence against Jesus, but none could be found. Eventually they asked him, "Are you the Christ, the Son of God?" "I am," answered Jesus. At this reply, the high priest tore his clothes in rage. "We don't need any more evidence," he cried. "This man is guilty of blasphemy." And he turned to the others assembled there. "What do you think?" he asked. "He claims to be the Messiah."
They all agreed that Jesus should be sentenced to death. Some of them spat on him. Then they blindfolded him and hit him with their fists. The guards took Jesus away and beat him too. As the Jews were ruled by the Romans, Jesus had to be tried by Roman law before he could be executed. So early in the morning, the Jewish leaders bound Jesus and led him away to the palace of the Roman governor, Pontius Pilate.
When Judas saw that Jesus was condemned to death, he suddenly felt terrible remorse. He took the 30 silver coins back to the Pharisees. "I have done wrong," he said. "I have betrayed an innocent man." "That's not our problem," they answered him. "It's yours." Judas hurled the money into the temple. Then, unable to stand the guilt, he went away and hanged himself.
He killed himself.
Meanwhile, Jesus stood before Pilate. "He's a troublemaker," the Pharisees told the governor, "and he claims to be a king." The Jewish leaders accused Jesus of many false things, to which he made no reply. Pilate questioned Jesus for a long time and found him guilty of nothing. "I find no reason to execute this man," he told the Jewish leaders.
At the time of Passover, there was a custom that one prisoner could be released on request. In the dungeons at that time was a man named Barabbas, who was accused of rioting and murder. To keep the crowds happy, Pilate offered to release Pilate offered to release the prisoner alone. "Shall I release the king of the Jews?" he asked them, but the chief priests and the Pharisees had urged the mob outside to shout against Jesus. "We want Barabbas. We want Barabbas," they cried out. "We want Barabbas." "Then what shall I do with the one you call the king of the Jews?" asked Pilate. "Crucify him," they shouted. "Crucify him." Pilate was very wary of executing an innocent man. "Why?" he asked them. "What crime has he committed?" But the people just shouted even louder. "Crucify him!" The Roman governor was not happy. He took a bowl of water and in front of the crowd he washed his hands. "I am innocent of this man's blood," he said. But he had Jesus flogged and handed him over to be crucified.
Interesting, huh? So here you go. There was Judas. That's Jesus talking to Pilate. Pilate washing his hands. But the blood will not be on my hands. Golgotha. After Jesus had been brutally whipped, the guards took him into the courtyard of the palace. "So you think you're a king, do you?" they said. "We'll see about that." The soldiers stripped Jesus and dressed him in a purple robe. On his head they placed a crown that they had made out of twisted thorns. Then the guards put a staff in his hand, knelt in front of him, and mocked him. "We salute you, King of the Jews," they called out. Then they spat on Jesus and used the staff to beat him on the head over and over again. Once they had used him for their own amusement, the soldiers led Jesus off to be crucified. Usually, those who were to be executed had to drag their own wooden cross outside to the city to a hill called Golgotha, the place of the skull. Jesus was so weak from the cruel flogging and beating, he was unable to carry his cross. The guards spotted a strong-looking African man called Simon coming toward them.
"You look fit enough," they said. "You can carry this man's cross to the place of execution." When they reached the top of the hill, the soldiers made Jesus lie down on the large cross while they hammered long, sharp nails through his hands and feet to attach him to the wood. Then they lifted up the cross and fixed it into the ground so that it stood upright. There Jesus hung, his arms outstretched, dying an agonizing death in the terrible heat. Above his head, the Romans had written, "This is Jesus, King of the Jews."
Almost dropped it. So you can look right here. And at the top you can see the little thing that says, "This is Jesus, King of the Jews." So sad. All right, the crucifixion. The guards sat at the foot of the cross and decided what to do with Jesus' robe. "This is a good piece of cloth," one said. "Let's not tear it." So they drew lots to choose which one of them would have the robe. People crowded around. They sneered and shouted, "He saved others. Let him save himself. He said he was the Son of God. Let God rescue him now." Others shouted, "If he is the Messiah, let him get down from the cross." Jesus looked at the faces of the Jewish leaders, which were filled with hate, and at the soldiers laughing below him. He prayed to God. "Father, forgive them," he said, "for they don't know what they are doing." On either side of Jesus, 2 robbers were also being crucified. One of them said, "If you are the Christ, why don't you save us all?" But the other robber called out, "Shut up! We deserve our punishment, but this man has done nothing wrong." Then he turned to Jesus and said, "Lord, remember me when you come into your kingdom."
Jesus was filled with compassion for the thief who had repented. He answered him, "I tell you the truth, today you will be with me in paradise." Near the cross were many of the women who loved Jesus. When Jesus saw Mary, his mother, weeping, and the disciple John close by, he said to his mother, "Dear woman, this man will be your son from now on." He said to John, "Look after her as if she were your own mother." At noon, the sun was hidden and darkness came over all the land. During the next 3 hours, Jesus grew weaker and weaker until the time came when he knew he was going to die. "I'm thirsty," he whispered. And the guard soaked a sponge in wine vinegar and put it to his lips. Finally, at 3 o'clock, Jesus cried out loudly, "It is finished! Father, I give my spirit to you." Then he bowed his head and died.
At the moment Jesus gave up his life, the great curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom, and there was a huge earth tremor. When those that were guarding Jesus felt the ground shaking beneath them and saw the dark sky above, they were terrified and cried out, "Surely this man was the Son of God." You can see the guards talking about the robe right there. And there is Mary and John. And there they are on the crosses. Jesus is buried. Jesus was crucified on a Friday, the day before the Jewish Sabbath. The Jews did not want dead bodies on show during the special day, so they asked Pilate if they could be removed.
A member of the Jewish council, a rich man named Joseph, was secretly a disciple of Jesus. He was a good, kind, honest man who had not consented to the death of Jesus at his trial. He asked the Roman governor if he could give Jesus a proper Jewish burial. Pilate agreed to his request and gave Joseph permission to take away the body of Jesus.
So with a friend named Nicodemus, Joseph carefully cleaned and bathed Jesus' body. Then, in accordance with Jewish custom, they wrapped it in strips of linen and put the burial cloth around his head. At the place where Jesus was crucified, there was a garden, and in this place there was an empty tomb that had never been used. As it was almost time for the Sabbath, the 2 men took Jesus' body and laid it inside the tomb. They heaved and pushed a huge round stone across the entrance and went away.
Close by, the woman that had cared for Jesus watched all that happened. Among them was Mary Magdalene. She saw where Jesus was buried. Then, as evening drew in, she sadly left the garden to respect the Sabbath day.
The Pharisees and chief priests were not content. Although they had successfully organized the execution of their enemy, they were still fearful. Once again, the Jewish leaders went to visit Pontius Pilate. "Sir," they said, "we remember that while he was alive, this impostor Jesus stated that after 3 days he would rise from the dead." The Roman governor listened curiously. They continued, "So give orders that the tomb where he is buried should be under guard until the 3rd day is over. Otherwise, his disciples may come and steal the body and tell people that Jesus had been raised from the dead. If this were to happen, it would be an even worse crime than saying he was the Messiah."
Pilate thought for a moment. Then he gave his orders. "Take a guard," he said, "and make the tomb as secure as possible." So the Jewish leaders hurried away. They put a seal on the stone across the entrance to the tomb and placed Roman soldiers in front of it.
So here you go. You can see Mary Magdalene down there. And you can see them talking to Pontius Pilate. And you see the Roman guards guarding the tomb. So a whole lot of stuff happened from Jesus in the garden all the way to him getting arrested, then going on trial, then he got crucified. He had to carry his own cross for part of the way before Simon was able to relieve him of that, and then he had to go up, and then when he died, and then the burial. So a whole bunch of stuff happened. Very, 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 very crazy day is Good Friday. But remember, it was all necessary in order to get to Easter. So I still can't believe it's almost Easter. So for this project, you're going to need a piece of paper. Really doesn't matter, whatever color. I asked Thomas what color he would think of this as the sky, and he gave me blue. I did mine on white. A black piece of paper, a white crayon, a glue stick, scissors. We're using watercolors, but if you don't have watercolors, any paint will do, or markers, even colored pencils or crayons. Really doesn't matter, because no matter what, it's going to come out super cool. So then what you're going to do is you're going to take your crayon. I'll use this one. You're going to take your crayon, put it down a little bit so you can see. You're going to make a hill like that. I don't know if you can see very well.
I can see.
I'll make it a little darker.
Maybe a little lighter.
A little lighter, yeah. And then you're going to make a cross in the middle. This is going to be Jesus' cross. And if it's not perfect, you can go back and fix it or whatever. It doesn't have to be perfect. And it doesn't matter how much white you have happening around either. It really is not a big deal. So there's one cross, and then you're going to, because he was surrounded, he had 2 other men with him at the time. We're going to draw their crosses too. Okay. So there you have that. Alrighty. And then what you're going to do is you're going to take your watercolors or your markers or your whatever type of paint, and you're going to start to paint. I'm going to start with dark blue. You're going to just do lines, okay? Just do some lines. It doesn't matter what colors you do. It doesn't matter. You can make it look whatever you want it to look like. And you're going to switch up the color. I'm going to go with a little bit of red here. Oh, I like that red. And you can blend them together to give a little bit of a get different colors in there. Really, this is why I think it's going to be really interesting to see how they're different, because they're all going to be different. You can't make them the same. So once you're all done with that and that is drying, you can go ahead and cut out your crosses. And then, since I wanted to be able to show you guys, what I did was I I already did it so that I could show you what it's going to look like. Once you're done cutting it out, now mine's not perfect. So, and I did mine on white paper. What you're going to do is you're going to glue your cross on top so you have a sky behind. And then when you're all done with that, oh, I guess we probably need a marker too. I might do mine in purple.
Yeah, you're gonna need markers too.
You can write whatever Bible verse you want to write, or any little Easter saying. I think I'm gonna do John 3:16. And add a little decoration here. And then, again, I want to see pictures of how they come out. Oops, I just messed up that marker. I want to see pictures of how they come out. And I want to, since we're not making a video tomorrow, if you do any Easter egg dyeing, or anything at all, whatever you're doing to beat the boredom, I want to see, all right? I'm so curious to know. Plus, I love new ideas for fun things we can do. So that's what mine looks like when it's all done. And we're probably going to hang these up in some more windows. I think we're kind of out of window space. Oh, we could do it in the spare bedroom. We're going to hang ours in the spare bedroom windows so people can see them as they go by, right?
Yeah.
All right. So thank you so much. We'll see you on Easter. Remember, no video tomorrow, but fill me in. Let me know what you guys are up to, and we'll see you guys soon, okay?
Bye.
Bye.